There are two groups in Honkai Star Rail that claim to follow the Aeon of Preservation, the IPC and the Architects. The Architects go around the universe building walls, cities, and defensive structures, following in the footsteps of their god, whereas the IPC claim to be Qlipoth's support staff, providing the Aeon with construction materials. While the Architects do seem to embody the principles of preservation somewhat, can the IPC really be said to be doing the same? Sure, they try to assist Qlipoth in its construction projects, but that really only involves one department out of the 8 that makes up the IPC. The other 7 seem to focus more on consumption and capitalism, driven only by profits and revenue. So what if, despite advertising themselves as followers of the Great Orange Giant, the IPC aren't actually followers of Qlipoth? But if they're not following Qlipoth, then who are they actually serving? That's what we'll be discussing in this video. Before we unpack that, if you want to see more Honkai Star Rail content, do consider subscribing to the channel. Now, I'm going to warn you, this video is both long and kinda out there. I'm going to claim some really crazy things, so just hold your comments until you reach the very end, as only then will it make sense. With the appropriate warnings out of the way, let's get into it. In the beginning, way before the IPC even called themselves the IPC, there were a small group of devotees who served the Ember Lord. After witnessing the Aeon work on its celestial command wall, they started providing Qlipoth with construction materials in an attempt to assist the giant floating rock. The group started referring to themselves as Qlipoth Support Group, and as more members joined, the more materials they could provide. Stones, wood, gold, and supernium alloys were all gifted as tribute to the Aeon of Preservation, in the hopes that it might assist the Aeon in completing its grand projects. What I've always found funny is that Qlipoth has never once used these materials and hardly even notices the efforts of this group. In hindsight, this could very well have been the very first hint we get about the IPC's true relationship with Qlipoth. In any case, because materials such as these are finite, they would eventually start trading with nearby planets to procure more of them. Slowly but surely, this expanded to include more planets and systems. This is what would eventually spark the very beginnings of their more profit-driven goals. According to them, focusing on making more money, improving trade, and developing logistics or transportation routes was all to ensure they could continue serving the god of construction. While the group started off with somewhat noble intentions, the IPC of today is largely different from the one we see during their earlier days. In fact, if you looked at the average IPC member, they don't seem like they follow preservation at all, let alone Qlipoth. Most of the departments may claim to carry out its activities in the name of the Ember Lord, but most of them are really more focused on profits and income. Just take the Strategic Investment Department as an example. Most of their high-ranking members like Jade, Aventurine, and Topaz all value monetary gain to some degree and would likely sacrifice planets for profits. Even their rank-and-file members like the Foot Soldiers only talk about their bonuses and promotions, stopping themselves from wreaking havoc only because Topaz threatened to demote them. If you really think about it, when has the IPC that we met up till this point, be it the Strategic Investment Department or that jerk Scott, ever shown any interest in preserving anything outside of their income and positions? All we have seen the majority of the IPC followers do is chase after the bottom line, overindulge in riches, and care only for gorging themselves in whatever vices they are interested in. Now, where have we seen such a behavior before? Where in the whole Star Rail universe have we seen an individual driven only by their need or desire to consume? Someone or something that has done this so much that they have garnered a reputation as a sentient black hole and all but represents the embodiment of gluttony. As some of you might have already guessed, I'm speaking of course about Ouroboros, the Aeon of Voracity who just so happens to be Qlipoth's archenemy. Now, some of you may not be too familiar with Ouroboros or the Path of Voracity, and a large part of this is due to the very little that has been revealed about the Aeon and its path. Ouroboros is very rarely spoken about, and there are currently no factions that actually follow it. Truth be told, we haven't even had an in-universe explanation on what Voracity actually represents. Just from observing its behavior though, it's pretty evident that Ouroboros is likely the embodiment of greed and hunger. It's the simplest and most direct interpretation, but admittedly not really the only one. I've actually explored this in a bit more depth on another video, but with how Ouroboros is always mentioned to endlessly consume, for the purposes of this theory, we are going to assume that it represents greed and gluttony. So when you compare the practices of the modern day IPC, it does seem like they are closer in ideology with Ouroboros rather than Qlipoth. They constantly pursue profits, income, or promotions, forever climbing the corporate ladder in an attempt to satisfy some personal void they have that will never be filled, exactly like Ouroboros and its hunger. But this rather vague connection doesn't prove the IPC has betrayed Qlipoth for Ouroboros. However, the more we look into the IPC, the more suspicious things get. As I've mentioned, of the 8 departments that make up the IPC, only one is still following the original intentions of its founders, the Building Materials Logistics Department headed by Taravan Keen. The department continues its practice of sending Qlipoth construction materials. This might make you think that of the 8 departments, the Building Materials Department and Taravan Keen are likely the most faithful. That is, however, until you take a look at what the Xianzhou Alliance think. You see, while the Alliance do ally themselves with other big players like the IPC, they also keep a detailed account of all their allies and the potential they might have if they were to threaten the Alliance. In the file repository found at the seat of the Divine Foresight, their notes on the Building Materials Logistics Department clearly questions whether Taravan Keen, a board member, is really a follower of preservation. It's clearly marked with a big ol' question mark, suggesting that the Xianzhou Alliance suspect Taravan of not actually following preservation. Suspicious. Then, based on the brief conversation between Jade and Aventurine at the end of Penacony, we learn that Taravan has actually allied himself with Diamond. That's right, the overindulgent and money-hungry department led by Diamond is allied with the person the Xianzhou believe might not even follow preservation. What does that say then about Diamond? On top of that, both Diamond and Taravan have allied themselves against Oswaldo Schneider. If you look at the very same notes the Xianzhou Alliance have on Oswaldo, can you guess how they have described him? They literally call him a zealot for preservation. A zealot, if you didn't know, is a religious fanatic. So why would the Xianzhou Alliance label one board member clearly as a religious and fervent follower of preservation, while another is questioned as to the strength of their faith? Does this hint that perhaps Taravan doesn't actually follow Qlipoth? But that's not all. Even among the 10 Stonehearts, who all follow Diamond by the way, there are a lot of suspicious figures. Jade, for example, clearly has the snake motif as part of her design. In her splash art, you can see the giant snake seemingly giving her an apple, a clear reference to the serpent that deceived Eve in the Garden of Eden. Does that mean that Jade is also deceiving us? If you take a look at her stamp, the symbol she uses to sign contracts with that we see as part of her ultimate, it's a snake coiled in a very specific pattern. You might say, well, yeah, she has a snake motif to her design, it's in line with her theme. Except that the way the snake is coiled is clearly in the shape of an infinity. If you search up the typical symbol of Ouroboros, the snake coiled in infinity would be one of the things that come up. But it doesn't even stop there. If you looked at the rest of the Stonehearts, each of them shown in the trailer displayed themselves indulging in some form of excess or vice. Some of them even look like outright villains. So if Diamond's followers seem to have hints of them acting in ways that are more in line with veracity, and that Diamond himself is allied with Taravan, does it mean that both Diamond and Taravan are devout followers of Ouroboros? It certainly seems possible. But I know what you're going to say. Aren't both these characters outright mentioned to be emanators of preservation in the databank? Yes, they are. But the databank isn't completely foolproof either. In one of the Astral Express Navigator's description, which is IC, it's mentioned that the fictionologists have heavily edited his information. Doesn't that at least present the possibility that the info on Taravan and Diamond could be doctored as well? It's at the very least a possibility. Perhaps the databank entry is a half-truth. They are emanators, but just not for preservation. We've seen such things happen with Akron as well before, so it wouldn't be too surprising. In the past, I've talked about the possibility of a civil war breaking out within the IPC, but I failed to realize at the time that this fight might have been predestined from the very beginning. Enna of the Order once had a deal with Qlipoth where Qlipoth was supposed to defeat Tazzaroth, and in exchange, Enna was going to defeat Ouroboros, but Enna didn't finish the job because they were absorbed. Maybe this fight isn't one that's occurring just among the IPC members, but a literal representation of a fight between age-old enemies, Qlipoth and Ouroboros. Taravan and Diamond could be representing Ouroboros and Voracity whether they are aware of it or not, and Oswaldo and whoever else is faithful to Qlipoth represents preservation. Even if we don't look at these specific examples and just look at the IPC as a whole, their actions don't necessarily adhere to what we should expect from preservation followers. The architects, for example, actively build cities or walls to ensure the survival of certain groups or species. They do this to follow in the steps of Qlipoth, and in doing so are somewhat contributing to the ideals of preservation. The city of Belobog, for example, was built by the architects to protect the inhabitants of Gerudo 6 and the Eternal Freeze, and their efforts partly contributed to why the people of Belobog are still alive today. The IPC, however, have only ever given Qlipoth construction materials, and that's basically it. Preservation is all about defensive actions and patience, but nothing we see Aventurine or Jade do in Penacony is reflective of this. They are greedy and quick to act. Now, of course, much like any theory, there are things that contradict this idea. For one thing, Louis Fleming, the leader of the IPC, has clearly stated that their role is to serve Qlipoth, but he's kinda missing. To their credit, the IPC have also helped plenty of planets by preventing extinction, famine, and death. They even put considerable effort in containing the spread of stellarons, carrying out experiments across 113 galaxies. You also have people like Topaz, who clearly believe what they are doing is for the greater good. These examples can be considered as aspects of preservation, as without the IPC, you could argue that most of these planets, Topaz planet included, wouldn't even be around. So in a sense, they do act in the will of preservation by helping all these planets, ensuring they continue to exist. It's also possible that the IPC members who act in the way that feeds Voracity just aren't aware of what they are doing. Perhaps they think they are still helping Qlipoth and serving preservation while unknowingly contributing to Voracity through their actions. It would be extremely ironic if all their efforts was truly to help uphold preservation, but they end up destroying it, having empowered Qlipoth's primary opposition. I also don't think that every person within the IPC is aligned with Voracity, and likely a sizable group still follows the Ember Lord. Diamond could also very likely just be playing both sides and just wants to get an outcome that benefits him rather than either one of these eons. With that said, there are enough hints and evidence that still puts this idea in contention, and at the very least puts some of the IPC's members in a rather suspicious light. Perhaps this is why Voracity hasn't had any factions revealed yet, because in truth, half the IPC are actually the ones feeding it. For every planet that they save or preserve, another one on the opposite side of the universe is gobbled up. This could be why Qlipoth has never truly been able to defeat its arch-nemesis. Half of its followers are unknowingly helping it. All this could also just be an elaborate ploy of the equilibrium to ensure balance is maintained. On the other hand, this could all just still be preservation, albeit a perverse version of it. Maybe the IPC are still following preservation, but just focus more on preserving their personal goals and wealth. Right now, it seems like it can go either way, and while the Astral Express is heading to a new location in 3.0, I think the background story will likely be related to the IPC and the looming civil war on the horizon. There are too many coincidences for this idea to be instantly refuted, but much like any theory on this channel, we'll need to wait and see if it turns out to be true. There are certainly hints and possibilities scattered throughout the game, but it could just all be a red herring. Maybe Qlipoth and Ouroboros are really good buddies, or maybe Ouroboros doesn't even exist anymore, having gotten so hungry they ate themselves. Only time will tell. I will leave you with one final thing. When we look at the motto of the Interastral Peace Corporation, the words "for the Ember Lord" are often heard. In the trailer for the 10 Stone Hearts, however, this motto is encapsulated in quotation marks. Is this just because it's just a motto, or is it a blatant hint that the 10 Stone Hearts at the very least don't truly believe in the Ember Lord? What do you think is really happening here? Are half the IPC really followers of Ouroboros, or are they all true followers of the Ember Lord? Let me know what you think in the comments. If you found the video entertaining, do consider liking and subscribing to the channel. Thanks so much for watching, and as usual, have a nice day.